So we're live again today. It's been a little bit since I've been Facebook Live, and to be flat honest, I just was kind of going through my own funk, just getting through everything we all have to get through every single day, and teams of people around, family, things just difficult for anybody. I don't care who you are. I've got good friends that do a lot of things, and even they get down. And so I'm on Facebook Live. I just got wrapped up in it and got sidetracked, really, from my daily leadership studies and some of the motivational things I do just to keep myself inspired. And I had a conversation with a gentleman here in Great Bend last week that kind of got me fired back up and was really needing that. And so today on Facebook Live, really wanting to think about and talk about, there's a lot of chatter out there right now on opening versus not opening our country and staying home versus not staying home. And I don't think anybody has all the right answers. I think we all have our opinions, our prejudices, seems to maybe even be falling along some party lines, which is sad but true. I think many of us know we need to get this economy rolling again. But what's creating in this process is just a lot of conflict, a lot of differing opinions. And on social media, the evilness of it's really rearing its head again as people are on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, inserting their opinions with really no thought, and caring less if they create conflict or problems or issues with the words they slam out on a keyboard and hit send. And it creates for difficult conversations. And so this last week I did a Facebook Leadership Thursday post that you all can subscribe to if you go to drnels.com, but on having difficult conversations. And all this is kind of playing through my head because I've had a lot of some very difficult conversations over the last 2 to 3 weeks with the consulting work that I do, even within our own household, even within our own clinic. These sort of times create some difficulties, but they're opportunities. And then as I see this opening versus not opening play out over the social media and television and news, it's going to get worse because the virus probably isn't going away, and some will want to keep closed, some will want to go open, and I fear it's going to get really ugly. And I think we all need to think about that and how we have difficult conversations about moving forward, because we have to keep moving forward. We can't just stop. And there's ways to move forward, ways to do things. But, we all have difficult conversations. So I'm going to hit on a few keys here, but, maybe you've had one with your spouse lately. Maybe you've had one with your son lately, or a coworker, or maybe you're an employee and you need to have a conversation with your boss that maybe he sucks. Because we all can think of bosses we've had that have sucked in the past. And maybe you need to have a hard conversation with them. Maybe you're the leader, and maybe you need to have a hard conversation with somebody that's not meeting your expectations, not meeting the team's expectations. And the difficulty in these hard conversations is no one ever taught us how to do them. Maybe you've been lucky enough to have a mentor or a pastor that's helped guide you in some difficult conversations. Maybe you haven't. Most of it's probably what we learned as we grew up as a child, watching our parents, watching coaches, watching teachers, watching pastors. But nobody ever really taught us how to do it, and we darn sure know the collegiate level didn't teach us how to have difficult conversations. And so I think we all need to study this and think about it. How do we have difficult conversations? Because maybe your spouse made you unhappy. Maybe my son Nash sitting here needs to step up to the plate and get better at what he's trying to get better at. But those are difficult things to do, and we have to choose our words wisely. As we think about these difficult conversations, the first thing I want you to think about is showing grace. My grandmother happened to be named Grace, and for me personally, I was absolutely terrible at giving grace for the first 32 years of my life. But had a pastor come along that taught me a lot about grace, and then my wife has taught me a lot about grace and extending grace towards people when you're having a difficult conversation, rather than just pounding on them, beating on them, and saying, you screwed that up, you made that mistake. We need to extend some grace, and some kindness is the next thing I want you to think about. Kindness is almost uncommon today to a certain degree, and as I tell people when I give talks on business, the cheapest thing we can do is give kindness, teach our staff to give kindness, because kindness is the new currency, because it's so uncommon. Simply being kind will gain you customers. Simply being kind will elevate your status. But show grace, show some kindness, because you've screwed it up too before. And the third point too is, yes, deflect inwards. And whatever difficult conversation you need to have, maybe it's with your dad, maybe it's with a kid, maybe it's with a friend that's letting you down and hurt your feelings. Maybe you need to go to that friend and let them know that, hey, what you did really bothered me. But the point number 3 is to deflect inwards, and, well, maybe how did I screw it up? Deflect inwards, that, or maybe I did that before. As my kids know, they've heard basically every single mistake I've ever made, and I figure that's the only way I can really teach them, is to deflect inward, to tell them everything I have screwed up, which has been a pile of things. But they'll learn from those. But as we go to have those conversations that, maybe a friend let you down, or maybe your partner let you down, or an associate veterinarian let you down, and you go to them and say, hey, I can't chew you up and down for this, because I've made that mistake myself, but I want you to think about that next time. We don't want to make that same mistake twice. But in deflecting inwards, it's taking responsibility for what maybe part you have in the situation. Because most of the time, we're probably all at fault for something in any given situation that occurs. So take responsibility for your part. And the next part is just simply to apologize. Apologize for your part, apologize for your lack of communication, apologize for your lack of clarity, apologize for your lack of ability. Having difficult conversations takes not only intent and energy, but it takes ability and intention to do so. And maybe you're at fault because you waited way too darn long to have that difficult conversation. Most often we're all guilty of waiting too long. Why? Because we avoid difficult conversations. Probably the number one rule broken in having difficult conversation is we're waiting. We're not having the conversation. And don't worry, that's natural. That's human nature. We all avoid difficult conversations because if we have difficult conversations, it typically requires some form of suffering. Having difficult conversations requires us to suffer. And so, in the end, a lot of times we just avoid them, which is something different about today when we have face-to-face conversations. We avoid those situations because we have to suffer. The challenge and trouble about social media today is we all sit behind this screen and we hammer out words like a keyboard mutant ninja and hit send because it's easy, creating more conflict. But have those conversations face-to-face. Apologize for your part. And the next point is something that I think we all are guilty of at some point or another. And as we go into the conversation and we have this mindset, I am going to teach you a lesson. I've had many of those thoughts cross my mind over the years. And a number of years ago, I realized, and studied and read that, when you go into a difficult conversation, that I'm going to teach you a lesson. typically means you are going to leave the conversation bitter and angry, because the only person that's going to leave with anything from that conversation is them, and you're going to leave it angry and bitter because your only goal is to teach a lesson, not to truly help that person. So don't go into any conversation thinking, I'm going to teach you a lesson, because only you will lose then. Another point that I like to talk about that I learned from Dave Ramsey in his talks is put on the right hat. And so my son sitting here listening, watching, when I talk to him or my wife or somebody at work, whatever it might be, typically the conversation requires me to have a couple different hats on. And if I'm talking to Nash about a situation he needs to learn from, I may first talk to him and say, hey, Nash, I'm going to put my father hat on in this part of the conversation. And I'm going to discuss with him things from a father's point of view. And then I'm going to take that hat off, and I'm going to say, I'm going to put on, my leader hat. And I'm going to talk to him from that standpoint. And the same goes for, at work. Last Monday, I had a conversation with a gentleman, me and my partner, Dr. Ty, and a client. We had to have a difficult conversation with him. And as I told him, I asked him if it was okay to do so, number one, which it's always a good idea to do that as well. Hey, can we talk about this? But then I first talked to him. I said, okay, I'm gonna talk to you with my veterinary hat on. And so we talked to this gentleman with our veterinary hats on. And then I said, okay, I'm gonna change the course of this conversation. I want to talk to you about some other things that maybe more to do with your success in life and your ventures. I'm gonna put my mentorship hat on, and asked him if it was okay to do that. And he said, sure. And so as we talk to people, maybe let them know what hat you're wearing. Am I wearing the leader hat? Or am I wearing the dad hat? Am I wearing the mentor hat? What hat are you wearing in that conversation? And if you will do that, a lot of times that creates more clarity for the person on the other end that you're talking to. So let them know what hat. And my last, what I tell people is my most important piece of advice, and I don't really remember, I think I learned it at a Ramsey Solutions deal conference, something, but if you're gonna have a difficult conversation, the best thing you can do, I'm telling you, the best number one thing you can do is to let them know you're getting ready to have it. A lot of times we go into a conversation, for example, me, Thanksgiving 2007, 2008, rounded up my entire staff on Thanksgiving Eve right at noon, and I just started screaming at them, hollering at them. And it wasn't good. It was going to be a difficult conversation, but my maturity was not good enough to have the conversation, and I blew it. Since then, though, I've grown, and one of the first things I do when I know the conversation is going to be difficult is I tell them. I did this a week and a half ago at a feed yard, and I told the entire crew, I said, hey, we're going to have a difficult conversation, and you guys might get unhappy. I might get unhappy. The manager might get unhappy. But we have to have this conversation. And so there's several rules, but everyone has to remain calm, cool, collected, and no one can leave. And when you set the tone for the conversation that way, hey, folks, we're gonna have a difficult conversation. We've had, I think it's no secret that we're having some challenges we need to talk about. We're all pretty well aware of that, but we need to get them on the table. We need to solve it. And everybody needs to remain calm, cool, and collected. Nobody can yell. Nobody can holler. Nobody can scream. Nobody can leave. We're all going to be on the same page, and we're going to work through this one by one. And I've done this, I don't know how many times over the last 5 years. Longer. I can remember the first time I ever did it was with a client, and it worked very, very well. But setting the tone of the conversation, not just barging in, pointing fingers, barking, yelling, like I did in 2002, 2008 with my entire staff, which at the time was not very many, maybe 7 of us, 6 of us. Now we're sitting close to 20. If I did that today with 20, I would be with about 10 fewer people if I guided myself in that way today. So as parents, as leaders, whatever it is, the people you're interacting with, this is all about raising your level of talent, your knowledge, so you can handle these difficult situations, difficult conversations. And as all of us, just as human beings, the difficult conversations can't be had pounding out things on a keyboard and hitting send on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. It will never solve anything. So we all just need to stop. Tell others to stop. I had a conversation with a radio station about stopping some nonsense. Stop the negativity. Stop the comments. They get us nowhere. And I think we as people, as good people, as leaders, stop the nonsense. Tell people to stop the nonsense. No difficult, worthwhile conversation will ever be had on Facebook and hitting send. Nothing good will happen. And I foresee that this thing's going to get uglier, quite a bit uglier, because we have some states opening, some states not opening. Some people within communities want to stay closed. Some people want to get open. Some people want to stay home. Some people want to get out. And this thing has the potential to get really, really ugly, and I sure hope it doesn't, and it's going to require some difficult conversations. And so today on this Sunday, think about those 7 aspects and difficult conversations. Feel free to go to our blog from Thursday morning. It's the written version of that. Because difficult conversations are very tough to have, or difficult to have, and no one ever taught us hardly ever to have them, or how to have them. We typically avoid them. We're scared of them because it requires us to suffer. It takes intent, it takes energy, it takes time, it takes focus. And so they just most often don't happen, which leads us to probably failure of some sort on some level at some point. But think about those 7 keys. I promise you, if you approach them with all of those 7 things in mind, you will begin to have some very powerful, difficult conversations that everyone will leave feeling better about. It's not always good. It's difficult. It may not always feel good because it's going to make you suffer, but you will grow yourself to the next level if you can do that. And remember that words create worlds. The words that come out of your mouth create the environment, they create the tone, they create the expectation. The words that are simply coming out of your mouth every time you step into that difficult conversation. So today, I hope you think about that, learn from it, study it, work at it, practice it. You're going to screw it up. Tell them, hey, we're going to have a difficult conversation. I've been watching this short, stubby, fat guy on Facebook telling me how to have a difficult conversation, and I'm trying to practice it. And I don't want to use or abuse you, but we're going to have a difficult conversation. I apologize. I should have had this 6 months ago. Let's talk. Remain calm, please. Give it a whirl, folks. Have a great day. Go kick some ass. We'll see you.